during COVID.
Cool.
I'm going to start the live stream and then we'll.
Okay.
Welcome to today's Power of Knowing webinar, which is part of a three-part series on aging well at home. Today's topic is brain health, protecting your cognitive strength. Understanding comes from knowing, and this three-part Power of Knowing series is designed to help you age well, safely, and confidently wherever you call home. Join us as we explore practical, empowering ways to stay strong in mind and body, create a secure and supportive living environment, and navigate health changes with clarity and compassion. Whether you're planning your own future or supporting someone you love, this series will give you the tools to make informed choices and live well at home today and in the years ahead. The Power of Knowing is a free webinar series created by AuthoriCare Collective, a nonprofit organization that empowers people to be active participants in their care journey, enabling them to live on their own terms through personalized support for mind, body, and spirit. To get us started, please welcome our moderator, Risa Hanau. Risa serves as clinical and community educator at AuthoriCare Collective and is also a member of the Cone Health Ethics Committee. She is a licensed clinical social worker. Risa, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Paul. It's my pleasure to introduce our panelist for today, Dr. Bethany Wanglin. Dr. Wanglin is a clinical psychologist with a passion for helping people build emotional resilience and live with greater purpose, clarity, and connection at every stage of life. Her work integrates the science of stress, emotion, and behavior to support meaningful change in everyday life. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And I want to welcome all of our participants who are joining us today. And we're going to get started with some polling questions. So you will see on your Zoom screen, we have 3 polling questions. These are anonymous, so please feel comfortable answering them. The first one is how your life might be touched by dementia or cognitive decline at this point, your relationship to that. The second question is asking about how much do you think lifestyle choices influence our risk of developing dementia? And then our third question is asking about what might be the most protective. What evidence do we have around these things to keep our brains as sharp as possible? So getting our brains in action by doing the polling questions is a good way to get us started. Thank you. I see lots of people are participating. So with the first question, we have a number of people who are responding that someone in the family has dementia, A large percentage of people also noting concern about the future and also having cared for someone. If we're looking down to that second question, how much do you think lifestyle choices? Very little, mostly genetics is lagging. Most people are saying somewhat, so it matters some, and then genes are a big factor, quite a bit. And then also, understandably not sure. That's why we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And then let's see, regular exercise seems to be the most popular answer for protecting our brain health. So great.
Great.
Thank you so much for everyone that participated. And that will get us started in our conversation. I think I want to first invite everyone to make use of the Q&A box on the Zoom screen. Can ask questions, and we will try to answer those during our time together. And know we will be sharing some references that will be emailed tomorrow, and you can also ask additional questions if we don't get everything answered today. But I think, Dr. Wanglund, to get us started, we had those great polling questions. So maybe our starting point is what actually is in our control?
Yeah.
What is lifestyle? What is genes? Where do we get that information and answer?
Right. Yeah. And so I think it's a typical assumption that a lot of us have made that dementia and cognitive decline is primarily genetically determined. But in fact, the recent research over the past couple of decades has shown that that's not actually the case. There are a very small amount of early onset Alzheimer's, and when we talk about early onset, meaning like in your 40s or 50s, like a very small percentage are due to a genetic mutation in which that is very much determined by genes. The type of kind of risk of cognitive decline that we think of that's later in life, after 65, while there are certainly hereditary factors, and while there are genes that we know do contribute to dementia and Alzheimer's risk in particular, the statistics are that 40% of dementia cases are actually determined by lifestyle factors. They can be, and these lifestyle factors being modifiable. And I can go on about that, but one thing I can add is that, there's also, right, an interaction between our genes and our environment. The technical term for that being epigenetics. But when we think about how people may carry a gene that predisposes them potentially to dementia or Alzheimer's, but then nearly kind of half of their risk pool is related to lifestyle factors. It is the case that changes that we make, or just choices that we make in terms of our diet, our exercise, our sleep, and social and mental stimulation, those things really matter in terms of influencing kind of how those genes, in like the kind of causal study on that specifically, but theoretically we know that. And again, there's this vast majority of research showing just how much of our dementia risk can really be influenced by our lifestyle.
So talk to us some about lifestyle, because maybe focusing on what is in our control. We can't change our gene reality, our genetic reality, but that question we had, a lot of people, I think the majority of responders said they felt that regular physical exercise was the strongest influence. Talk to us about the importance of exercise and some other things in that lifestyle mindset that we're able to focus on.
Sure. Yeah. And I think as we talk about this too, we can kind of make connections back to how those lifestyle choices also like translate into our brain aging, right? So, when it comes to exercise, exercise rate has a very strong positive impact on our cardiovascular health.
Okay.
And our cardiovascular health is something that highly influences our risk for dementia. And so I have my various kind of stats that I think are really impactful when we think about these things. And so just thinking about how people with type 2 diabetes have a 65% increased risk of dementia. People with high cholesterol, and hypertension both kind of translate into about a 40 to 50% increased risk of dementia. And so these cardiovascular risk factors matter a lot because, again, our heart is essential and it influences our brain health directly. And so because those exercise positively helps those conditions, hypertension, diabetes, cholesterol, we can think of how that directly kind of lowers our risk. And I think the research, there's kind of the most proliferation of studies on exercise's effect on positive effect on cognition and brain health overall. It's these are really persuasive data when you look at them. Um, Specifically, what is recommended based on that research is kind of what we hear, right? I think we hear in the media about how 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity exercise or 75 minutes a week of vigorous intensity cardiovascular exercise can drastically reduce our dementia risk because it drastically improves our cardiovascular health. Um, and the research, that this comes from is also really persuasive too, because it has been done in populations of folks who have higher risk factors. They are already in maybe leading a sedentary lifestyle and are then participate in a structured exercise intervention for like 12 weeks or so at the minimum. And then when you scan people's brains and measure their cognitive functioning, there's significant improvement there. And as long as people keep up with that type of exercise, that improvement lasts. That protective factor is there.
I would imagine a part of that also might be there's socialization involved, right? When we exercise in a group setting, particularly, maybe we're getting up, we're going out, we're having socialization. I can think about things like how does the socialization, our being able to hear well, our diets. Sounds like exercise is really clear, but these other factors have an impact as well, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're getting at something important there too, in that there are these specific kind of life domains that represent like kind of risk or protective um, factors for dementia, and they all are kind of connected. And so I think we'll probably end up talking a bit more about that in a bit. But to answer your question, so some of the other modifiable kind of risk factors include, like you said, social and mental stimulation. One of the, I think, in fact, I was just having a conversation with a client recently about this, how that social and mental stimulation is so important and often overlooked. There have been studies that even look particularly at loneliness. So people who endorse feeling loneliness, or people who would kind of agree with the statement that I miss having people around, or I experience a general sense of emptiness, they're twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's. And we can think about how that kind of like socially isolated lifestyle can be at our detriment in various ways, but also the other side of that, engaging in social activities, just having conversations with other people, is stimulating neurologically. It has us use various parts of our brain, right? And like you said too, being able to pair that with exercise, or people who are not just getting together to chat socially, but are also engaging in another activity at the same time, be it playing board games, working on artistic projects, volunteering, participating in a book club and having intellectual discussion. That then brings a cognitive component into it as well. Um, and so when we think about social and mental stimulation, it's like that kind of combination, rich interaction. Like you said, Risa, too, if that's paired with an exercise class, then we're really feeding our brain and nervous system, that's in a way that's kind of building resilience. Um, so that's the social and mental stimulation. I can talk about sleep, nutrition, emotional health, stress management. Um, what, where would you want me to start?
Well, I think it is interesting in terms of how it all comes together, and we can't say that, what ultimately causes or protects us, right? We want to do everything we can. So each one of those areas, tell us about sleep in terms of, we hear sleep is important, but link it for us to that brain health reality.
Absolutely. Yes. So sleep, we're all programmed to sleep, right? So it must be important for some reason. And of course, intuitively it's a crucial physiological pattern that we have. And the function of sleep uh, really boils down to restoring our organs, restoring the function, obviously, of our brains and our nervous systems, and clearing out toxins too, through our body. When I work with folks on insomnia and we talk about the different kind of sleep cycles throughout the night, I liken it to our dishwasher that has these different kind of phases that it goes through, and it's got a cycle that it runs on, and it's never great when we open it in the middle of the cycle because kind of disrupts that process. But similarly, our sleep allows our body to refresh, restore, and clear out toxins. And the data on dementia risk and sleep are all, if you have had clinical insomnia, so like very long, kind of standing pervasive problems with sleep, that can increase risk between 13 and 50%. More recent data that is very worth thinking about is just that even short sleep duration, like less than 6 hours a night, for a long period of time, has been shown to increase our risk. And so, though, even those two things, kind of help us think about how, okay, that refreshing, restoring, that cellular kind of regeneration that happens when we turn our dishwasher on at night, is not effective. It's getting
Right.
interrupted.
Right.
And the last thing I'll say about that too, biologically, is that those sleep disruptions are associated with increased inflammation in our body. And we hear a lot about inflammation in our world today, right? And broadly speaking, that is a big mechanism as far as contributing.
Actually, there's a question, is there a connection between inflammation and dementia?
Yes.
Somebody just put that, so there is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
And I think that, when we think about many of these lifestyle factors, in particular, exercise, sleep, nutrition, stress management, again, broadly speaking, one of the, kind of underlying commonalities there is that those habits reduce inflammation. And if we are um, out of sync in those habits, then we expect higher inflammation, and it absolutely is related to dementia.
Hmm.
Um,
Before we leave sleep, somebody just put in, is sleep disturbance that is associated with work duties an increased risk for dementia? So people who might do different shifts or things of that sort. Do we know if there's a link between that and dementia?
Yes, I wouldn't be able to cite the specific study, but yeah, there is a link between shift work, and sleep quality, and yeah, the overall and then if you think about even just kind of the step down from there, then relating to overall increased dementia risk because of the sleep difficulties. It's not, a life sentence or the sole factor, but definitely when I work with folks who have have shift work or a history of that, and then have had kind of disrupted sleep as a result, we talk about, what can they do in their current situation to improve their sleep quality as best as they can, and then
Mhm.
also address those other lifestyle factors.
And it sounds like, I mean, a common theme might be we want to do as much as we can.
Mhm.
Work on our exercise, work on our sleep. So then what about working on, you've used the term, cognitive resilience and
Mhm.
using our brains. And we had that question, that polling question about what really is the most helpful. I think, let's see if I can remember. We had games and puzzles, and we had that exercise, and we had supplements, and we had brain apps. And are these things all helpful? Some more for some people, more than for other people?
Right. Yeah, that's such a great question and really important because there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of noise in the brain health world. And so you can come across mention of, these brain training apps or a specific supplement. And I think it's worth mentioning there that, like beware of things that are selling kind of like a miracle cure, or this being the one thing that you need to keep your brain healthy, or whatnot. Um, Specifically when it comes to that cognitive stimulation, it it is not the case, like while playing a particular brain training app may help a person improve that one specific skill. Maybe they're working just on attention or processing speed, or training their memory, their short-term memory. Those, like the performance that they, that particular game or app, it doesn't seem to translate or generalize outside of that domain, outside of that specific app. And I think some people will say, okay, I've been playing this brain training app and I do feel like I'm a little bit sharper. And I wouldn't argue intensely with that, but it is true that, like, through what research has shown is that the kind of farther reaching benefits of those types of games are not that strong. What really matters is uh, the, like, diversity, the variety of types of stimulating activities that we do. There was a research study that showed that people who engaged in at least 11 social and leisure activities a week, and that's not to say that they did 11 different things, but they had, that kind of quantity and then a variety of activities per week, had a 63% lower risk of Alzheimer's. And so what we want to think about is engaging in different types of activities, some that get us outside and get us moving, others that might involve, doing puzzles or brain games, bonus if it's with another person, things that are creative in nature, engaging in arts or learning a new instrument, listening to music. That type of mental stimulation is really important. And the one other piece of that I think is really neat is that, we also want to think about kind of challenging ourselves, doing something that is a little bit outside of our comfort zone with one of these activities. If I've never taken a pottery class and I, go to
Right.
try that, it's not easy, but the work that my brain has to do in learning it and getting used to that new activity, it's like flexing a muscle. That social and mental stimulation really is like a use it or lose it type situation.
I think that, I see a line where, variety in our exercise, variety probably in our diet, variety in our activities, all of these things, as you said, diversifying what we're doing. Otherwise, we keep using the same parts of our brain, and that
Mhm.
challenge might not come in the same way.
Mhm.
Um, let's see, I'm looking, we've got a couple of questions and a few more have come in about the inflammation. So I just want to go back. It, for checking inflammation, that's something a physician might be able to help with
Mhm.
in terms of is there a blood test, or how is that something that is measured?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think there are multiple different types of markers that can show up on blood panels
Mhm.
that would reference inflammation and going to your physician and talking about, that particular concern, making sure that you do get a comprehensive blood panel done is definitely the first step. Because there's various markers of specific types of inflammation that would kind of relate to different body systems, but they all are meaningful. And so talking to your doctor specifically about that is a great first step.
And then someone's asking about stress,
Mhm.
so where does stress in our life impact the potential to increase our likelihood of developing dementia of some type?
Right, yeah. And so chronic stress is really the thing that is a risk factor for dementia.
And
So,
define that for us. What
right.
is chronic stress?
Yeah, exactly. And so really experiencing kind of that pressure and drive, managing a lot of different, I mean, the actual objective things that could be involved in your life that cause stress could be very different from one person to another. But when we think about being under that pressure, having to manage multiple responsibilities, thinking about different uh, careers that include increased stress, shift work would kind of fall under that umbrella as well because our body is being taxed by those kind of different demands. But there's not a break. There's, every day, kind of day in and day out, the body is not receiving adequate kind of like break from stress so that I can pause and say, okay, I've got a chance to kind of rest and recover. That chronic stress is um, uh, not only maybe the weight of multiple responsibilities or a high pressure job, but also people that are maybe exposed to traumatic events and things um, that they may not have control over, but they are confronted by various losses or other types of traumas that happen multiple times throughout their lifespan. That is different than going through a busy season at work and then things slow down, or, having to get up and give a presentation and, having to prepare a lot for that, and losing some sleep, and then things kind of slow down. We think about chronic stress, it's more that kind of relentless exposure, if that makes sense.
So even I'm thinking about caregivers,
Mhm.
people who are caregivers over a long period of time. That sounds like part of what you're describing.
It is, absolutely. I'm glad you picked up on that, because that's definitely a environment of chronic stress. You're having to constantly adapt, make a lot of different decisions. You have carry the weight of, responsibility for your loved one and whatever else you're also carrying in your life.
Mhm.
And physiologically, those stressors, being exposed to those stressors, as we were just talking about inflammation again, when my body's stress response system is turned on, having to meet these demands, um, take kind of over duties for my loved ones, or make important medical decisions, those events turn on this stress response system where my body's saying, okay, I'm having to meet a challenge. And physiologically, in the short term, that turns inflammation, because it's like any other type of like kind of stress challenge to our body, the body's going to try to kind of respond to that. So it kind of increases inflammation, but then chronic stress can essentially kind of just throw the balance off in terms of how like our immune systems work. And that again ties into our inflammation. And so biologically, that's a really important
Right.
kind of connection.
And it would also impact my ability to go and do that exercise or
Yes.
go and have those social interactions. So that also would be coming
Right.
together.
Right. Or have restorative sleep. Lots of folks who
Right,
are caregivers have
right.
disruptive sleep for multiple reasons. And also the impact of stress on our body is that we typically have less restful sleep. We sleep lighter. We don't get that restorative
Yeah.
cycles.
So
Yes.
there's a question, and I'll ask it and let us know if you know of any research, or asking about the GLP-1 medications that a lot of people are taking, and whether that has any research yet, the
Yep.
benefit of that medication reducing dementia risk. Do we know that yet, or is too soon? And
It's
those medications are for diabetes
Mhm.
and for weight loss and for some other medical situations.
Exactly. Right. Yes, that's such a hot topic. And I know that there is research being done. I don't think that there's enough data at this point to make
Okay.
a definitive conclusion. And I too, it's even hard for me to keep up with the pace. I too am aware of uh, some research that is speaking specifically to like, could GLP-1s like directly reduce the risk of dementia? And I know that that's not anywhere near in terms of final, but that is being
Yeah.
studied.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. So more to come.
mhm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so we've been using the term dementia, and somebody very appropriately has asked a question that I know I hear a lot, which is, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? Or is there a difference?
Yeah, this is great. And um, I think I'll even kind of answer a bit, broadly around that too, because we've been saying the risk of dementia, and like it's important to think about like, okay, what does cognitive decline look like in general?
Right.
And so there's normal aging. Once our brains get to about 25 years old, they stop growing. And then for a little while they're stable. And then, well, oxidation happens um, as time goes on in any parts of our body. And so naturally it is normal for the brain cells in our brain to start dying off. Luckily, we have billions of them, and so it doesn't become this precipitous decline usually. But it is normal for there to be kind of a loss of brain structure and function very gradually over the course of life.
And what
Um,
does that look like? Like, what is normal, which I'm sure is hard to absolutely define, but
right. Well, what I typically tell people, like an anchor point, is that once we get past about age 40, it's normal for there to be about a 5% decline in our cognitive functioning every decade. And so, you can kind of picture like just a little line on the graph, kind of slowly going down as we get into our 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. That 5% decline may get a little bit faster in our 80s, as that decline does happen a bit more rapidly when we get to that point in life. But there is a normal kind of rate of decline in our cognitive functioning as we age. Then there's something called mild cognitive impairment, which is different from dementia. So mild cognitive impairment means that um, our cognitive abilities are lower than they should be for that normal aging kind of curve. But importantly, it is not impacting our functioning in our day-to-day life. So there are folks out there who experience mild cognitive impairment, which we measure by testing, cognitive testing. And so they're having some memory troubles that are more than they should be for their age, but they're still maintaining independence. It's not impacting, their life in a very significant way.
so what does that look like? I can't remember a friend's name, or I can't remember, like, what might be some behavioral things that I or someone might notice.
Hmm. So in terms of like kind of the normal aging cognitive changes, these are just like mild working memory difficulties. I can't remember that friend's name right off the bat, but in a minute I got it. I picked it
Yeah.
up. When I say, oh, I can't remember who told me that, was it you or someone else? Like our source memory is sometimes a little bit, we have a little bit more trouble with that. I love the one where it's like, because this happens for me too, where, you walk into the room and you forget why you came in there. These are those kind of mild cognitive changes that are part of our normal aging process. Mild word finding difficulty, again, where it just might take me a little bit longer to come up with that word. Um, but at the same, oh, and actually, I should also add, in addition to memory, there's oftentimes kind of just like a slower processing speed. Like it
Mm.
takes us a little bit longer to take in information. Or if I think about, I don't know, they changed the interface where I have to like enter my password for my banking information and I have to figure that out and it's new. Like it feels like it takes me a little bit longer than it used to. That kind of slowing down of processing. But you asked like, if someone has kind of more than mild um, difficulties, more than just the sort of normal aging, what would that look like? And so, you can, and for folks who have like mild cognitive impairment, often that is a precursor to developing dementia, that they're just not experiencing that functional impairment yet. So when we kind of cross into um, difficulties that are not kind of the normal aging process, first of all, it's, more frequent difficulties with that forgetfulness, word finding. It's now, not just what did I walk into this room for, but where am I? Loss of orientation. Um, Not necessarily just forgetting like who told me that, was it you? But it's more like repeating the same stories within the same conversation. That loss of short-term memory being much more pronounced. And a lot of times too, when we are looking at someone who's kind of developing those more intense difficulties with memory, we and if it's someone we know very well, we can kind of tell, like, they have begun to have more trouble in areas that they really used to not have trouble in. The things that they used to really enjoy talking about or doing, they're now having a lot more difficulty with. Um, yeah.
So what do we do? I still want to get to the dementia
Mhm.
versus Alzheimer's
Yes. Yep.
question and
Yep.
defining that. But
Yep.
what do we do? I am concerned either for myself or I'm concerned for a loved one. What's our starting point? You mentioned testing, but do we start with our primary care provider to rule out other health issues and then they help us get to testing, or when do we sort of say, I need to go get this checked out and where do I go?
Right, exactly. So I think, if you have any concerns, of course, it's never a bad idea to bring that up to your doctor, even if you think, oh, I don't know if it's, maybe it's not that, bad or whatnot. Like, I think if you have any concerns, it's great to open that conversation with your doctor. Because I think it is true. A lot of us will kind of dismiss some things as, oh, it's not really a problem. Um, but better to be evaluated sooner rather than later. And yes, I would start by talking to my primary care doctor for the reasons that you said, being able to have them look at um, other aspects of my health, whether it's, doing blood tests or thinking about vitamin deficiencies or that kind of stuff. So they can look at those other factors. Um, and a lot of primary care offices, they can do just a very quick kind of screening of cognitive functioning that will give some information. And even regardless of whether a person is showing problems on a screener, a physician may still very rightfully refer them for further testing. Um, and so once you've talked to your primary care doctor, and I would encourage people to request a referral for a neuropsychological evaluation, a cognitive assessment. Um, because those assessments really do give a comprehensive sense of different types of cognitive abilities, memory, attention, processing speed, executive functioning, and really show, okay, like how is my brain doing in each of these areas? What might it mean? And what can be done? And so that type of comprehensive assessment always yields really helpful information. A doctor may also refer you to a neurologist who obviously specializes in the brain. And that person sometimes may refer you to testing, but there's nothing to be said that, like, can be said that you can't do both, kind of earlier on. Um, yeah. And what other questions would you have about that?
Well, and so that can help define. So let's talk about the dementia being overarching
Hmm.
diagnosis
Yes.
and then Alzheimer's being one of many different types, correct?
Exactly. Right. So we talked a bit about kind of normal aging, mild cognitive impairment, and then when dementia is that umbrella term that is essentially indicating that there is significant impairment in at least one cognitive function, like memory or attention or executive functioning. So usually there's one or more than one, sorry, usually there's two um, or more. And then also importantly, dementia is defined by that impairment in functioning. So I've lost independence. I'm not no longer able to manage my medications. I can't pay the bills anymore. I've not been able to, drive safely. And so dementia is defined by those kind of two things. And then Alzheimer's, like you said, is a type of dementia um, in which, right, those amyloid plaques are the sort of underlying cause of the cognitive changes and the um, structural problems in our temporal lobe, in particular, our hippocampus. So there's Alzheimer's is the most common type of dementia, most commonly diagnosed. Vascular dementia is related to blood flow changes in the brain, whether that's from a discrete stroke or what we call like microvascular changes over time, in which basically blood flow is disrupted to parts of the brain that causes deterioration. So vascular is the next most common. There can be both. You can have kind of both going on, which is more common than not, I would say. And then kind of less common, but very prominent types include like Lewy body disease, Lewy body dementia, which accounts for, I think, about 10 to 15% of dementia cases, in which there's problems with executive functioning, and then some motor symptoms that are kind of like Parkinson's. And then frontotemporal dementia is one that we hear about. I think Bruce Willis is the person who's, well known for that at this time. And that's, I think, about 15% of cases as well. And so those are sort of the different types of like neurological conditions that cause these disruptions in our cognitive functioning. Also, when we get to that kind of discrete stage of dementia, behavioral issues and personality changes are much more prominent and more common and associated with those different conditions.
And knowing the type of dementia can be beneficial because it might help inform the course of the progression.
Mhm. Sure, yes, it might. So that's one of the reasons why a comprehensive cognitive assessment can be very helpful, so that there can be clarity on, what type are we likely dealing with, and usually there's collaboration between the person who does the assessment and like the neurologist as well. And yes, and for that reason, that's why it's important to have that diagnosis, because right, you can have better understanding of what the trajectory or progression might look like. There are differences in terms of how different types of dementia respond to different types of treatment. For example, like memantine or Aricept, these medications that can help kind of support cognitive functioning. And then also for caregivers to kind of understand what they're seeing with their loved one in terms of their behavior, or, how their abilities change over time. To know that, okay, this, for example, like with Lewy body dementia, there's very specific types of like sleep disturbances and hallucinations that are associated with that condition in particular. And so to know what's associated with this diagnosis and to kind of be familiar with what to look out for helps
Right.
everybody.
And that could also help us then get to a particular resource like the Lewy Body Association, or to get more knowledge and support,
Right.
because then caregiving becomes a increasing need, I would imagine, as that dementia progresses, whatever type it is. Because is it the case that all dementias are progressive?
Yes, right. And there are some of the things that we've talked about um, are influential in terms of helping preserve a person's kind of brain capacity and resilience, kind of working against that decline. The decline is happening, but it is important for folks to know that these lifestyle factors matter, at all ages and stages, that, there is that potential to kind of slow decline over time. But yes, there's not a cure, right? So these are
Right.
progressive conditions.
So somebody has asked a question whether like multitasking, attempting to multitask will affect the rate of a cognitive decline. And I think that speaks to, that's interesting. Once we get a diagnosis, that doesn't mean we should stop worrying about sleep and exercise and socialization. Those things can slow the progression. So is multitasking a good thing to try to do, or do we know if that impacts? dementia
Yeah.
progression?
I don't know if we know how it impacts, if it impacts. We do know that it gets harder with normal aging in general, like our ability to multitask does kind of decline at that 5% rate that we talked about a little while ago. And so I would say like pushing ourselves to continue to multitask may be kind of like, not very helpful and effective. I think multitasking also does it can kind of create stress, especially again as we get older, because we have less capacity. Um, and I think that is something that people will talk about when they are confronting cognitive changes, whether they are kind of normal or maybe in that MCI, mild cognitive impairment range. They'll say, man, I used to be able to multitask and now I really can't. And it's really frustrating. And part of when I work with people and supporting them around this, I kind of try to reframe that and say it's okay. Like actually helps to calm our nervous systems and helps kind of kind of decrease the demand from a stress standpoint is actually a good thing.
Mhm. So somebody is asking thoughts about medication, and I don't know specifically, the question is about a behavioral medicine like Abilify. And I'm
Mhm.
sure the whole topic of different medications, when and why, and how they're used is a
Yeah.
long discussion.
Yeah, that's a whole different like the whole nother webinar and maybe its own series. I will say that prescribing medications like Abilify is not uncommon for certain types of dementia in particular at different stages. And oftentimes because like cognitive decline and dementia can be associated with mood issues, depression, and that kind of thing too, both ways. And so it's often the case that mental health medications will be used to help support a person who's going through who has mild cognitive impairment or full-on dementia. Abilify in specific is often used for helping people with kind of mood, behavior, sleep, typically at later stages.
So I want to spend a bit of time as we're coming towards the end to think about resources and, in terms of not only for the person with the diagnosis, but also for those caregivers that are out there in terms of when we get this diagnosis, it is devastating, I think.
Mhm.
There's a lot to learn, there's lifestyle changes, there's today and then what's coming. So talk to us some about resources that are out there and helpful things.
Yeah, definitely. So you're very right. I mean, when we get this diagnosis, it's life altering. Can be very devastating. And for many people, when that diagnosis is given, there isn't, it's sort of like kind of just given, and there's maybe some recommendations, but there's not immediate support kind of right after that appointment or commonly in a lot of our medical settings. And that's something that we feel really passionate about, like, helping people to connect with supportive resources, not just right after, but going forward. Of course, organizations like the Alzheimer's Association, or if you've been diagnosed with something like Parkinson's, the Parkinson's Foundation, these are really great jumping off points for finding information, support groups, chapters locally in your area where you can get just in contact with other people who are going through the same situation or are have expertise in the area. I do really encourage caregivers to consider their own stress and their own health and mental health needs early on, in seeking out or asking for resources around therapy, counseling, even thinking about how working on something like your sleep is beneficial for that for your ability to give care to your loved one. Um, that is something that, again, like in our clinic, that's something that we are really dedicated to and passionate about, and that giving somebody having somebody come in and go through an assessment, they then have the option to continue receiving mental health support both for themselves and their loved one, and are able to kind of check back in over time about as their needs change too. Um, you know, um, so as far as like kind of support for families and loved ones, there's that initial kind of network. Um, think about like what resources are out there for resilience, for protecting your brain, whether you are in that caregiving relationship or you're at a point right now in life where you said, okay, like I want to live with as much vibrance and cognitive resilience as I can. What are some area, places I can go as far as getting help with improving my sleep, or you know, uh, learning about like the Mind diet, which helps improve my nutrition for brain health. So there are some resources specifically along those lines that are going to be in the email that you
Mhm.
send to folks. And I really encourage folks to look at that. One other quick resource that I really love is out of Emory University. They have what's called a cognitive empowerment program, and they actually have a YouTube channel that has a just comprehensive library of resources about dementia and brain health. So anything from a series of full-length videos of Tai Chi classes that you can do and you and your loved one can do for brain health, to videos about various types of dementia and the kind of biology there, the treatments, and connection to, again, like organizations and support groups that may be relevant to your particular situation. And that's just one of many. That's kind of a flagship resource that I really love to recommend to people.
And I think maybe this will be our last question, but it's a good question, which is, what can you do if you have mobility limitations for exercising? And it sounds like finding some accommodation or creativity in terms of maybe it has to be a chair exercise class rather than standing, but we want to keep our focus in those
Yes.
different domains that we've mentioned.
Absolutely. Yeah. So with mobility limitations, like think, staying open-minded that there can be adaptations that will still help you to exercise for you. I think often I help people kind of get connected with even a physical therapy clinic that can do an assessment and help kind of recommend adaptive type exercises. Perhaps there's water, water therapy or pool therapy that can be done, or things that are chair related, like you said, or even just, light weights that are still within my ability, just given my, mobility issues. I will mention that even strength training has shown to have very important and healthy effects. So it's not just cardiovascular is very important, but weight training is also very important for maintaining our cognitive ability.
Right. Well, this has been a fabulous conversation. I think we could probably talk for another hour and then another hour.
That's right.
But thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone who has participated, and somebody has just asked a question about the resources. So everyone who registered today for Zoom, you will get an email tomorrow, and that will have not only an access to the recording, but also links to all of the different resources and more that Dr. Wanglund mentioned. So thank you for those resources. Thank you for what you do each day. And thank you everyone who has joined us. I want to invite everyone to participate in part 3 that we are going to be having in our series, and that's on April 9th. And we're going to be talking about aging well and really focusing in on that financial security and protecting our future. And we have a representative from AARP joining us, and also an elder law attorney joining us. So that will be an important conversation in our third part of the series. And I want to share a quote that touched me as we think about keeping our brains active. And it says, "The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled." And so Plutarch had said that, and it is perhaps our thought as we leave this space. But again, thank you, Dr. Wanglin, and everyone who has participated with us. And we look forward to you joining us on April 9th for part 3 in our ongoing series. And I hope everyone has a great day as we move into spring. Thank you.
Thank you.